Hello everyone and welcome to Unmatched, the matching up list thing, because I am going to be putting the characters, all of the characters that have been so far released for Unmatched in an order. Now most people would do this in a sort of order that would, maybe say power level or, the biggest hitters. I'm just going to be going through and rating them for the most to least fun. Because, let's be honest, sometimes a really bad character is still fun to play as, and we play board games for fun, not necessarily just to win, even if in this game you are just trying to beat your opponent down. So let's jump in straight away with Alice. We're going to go through in alphabetical order. It doesn't matter what set they're from, although that might come into, why they're good or not. So Alice, I think, will start off with mid-tier. Alice, fairly fun to play, has that interesting sort of change up thing of certain cards will allow you to change up your size or down your size, so you're shrinking small. I think that's really, it feels like what it should be for an Alice in Wonderland sort of character. I feel there could have been some wackier things maybe, but that size thing is sort of the perfect sort of main point for that character, and it works really well. It's not massively inspiring, and it can be really painful when you're forced to switch to the other size, so you're no longer getting that defense, you're getting the attack as someone's about to hit you. It's a good character. It's not overly strong, it's not overly weak, but it's a middle ground. Beowulf, I think this one, it should be maybe the same as Alice, but there's the two things here. First of all, one of the cards that can just outright kill a sidekick. It's not great against, say, a Medusa, where the Harpy's sidekicks are pathetic, but against someone like Watson or something like that, where it's a chunky sidekick, ooh, all of a sudden that card's cool. And the way the rage builds up, I think it means you've got some nice choices there, because all of a sudden I'll take 1 damage, sure, why not, give me that little bit of rage. It's an interesting choice, so therefore just slightly above. Bigfoot, low tier. It's not completely boring because it hits big, but it's one of the better characters, I think, to learn the game, especially on the 2-player foresty sort of map that it comes with. It's not overly inspiring, but for a first game, Bigfoot, I think, is a good character to learn as. So for a first play, higher up. For continuing playing, it's not too fun. Bruce Lee, bang, top tier. I know this is going to be frustrating because there's going to be some others in this list. Bruce Lee, for instance, is ridiculously expensive. It's top tier fun to play as because he's got these lots of little jabs that allow you to sort of get cards out of your deck and sort of do like lots of little attacks. It's not great against some characters that are, just Luke Cage, for instance, who just sponges damage. Not great against that, but against some of the smaller ones, or even like against Medusa, where you could, quite easily take out those harpies because of these little attacks, it becomes quite good. And I don't know, Bruce Lee, awesome character. I'm sorry it's top of the list because it's so expensive to get hold of, it's so hard. I wouldn't say you need it. I'd say if you can get it at a decent price, go for it. A lot of fun, but it is one character, and I've seen this go for the cost of like 2-4 character boxes. Not worth it. Get 4 characters, but for fun, Bruce Lee is there. And while we're on it, I'm sorry, Deadpool is there as well. If you think of Deadpool, 4th ball breaks, kind of weird silly deck, that's what you're getting. Again, not worth the silly amount of money it goes for. I was very lucky to get it sort of just before the price really rocketed to, it's easily like 60-70 quid if you want to get a brand new Deadpool now. That's ludicrous when it was like $20-25 when it was released. Really hard to get in the UK. Really glad I have it. He's awful. Like, I have never won as Deadpool, but I will always play as him if, you know, someone wants to play against him, because, or certainly against a new player, because they've got a lot more chance of winning, because he is awful. I like his quirky plays. I like some of the weird fourth wall breaks of, is there food on the table or something like that, but he isn't great. He's got like 10 health. He dies in like 2 hits, just like Bigfoot, if you land them and you don't have a defense. That's how easy Deadpool is to die, but it's just fun because it feels like you are playing as the sort of wacky character. Dracula. I'm going to say, for me, I think it's high tier. It's because of the way that, you know, you're trying to move Dracula and the sisters round to try and get them to trigger your special ability, and the fact it's kind of Dracula really helps. I think the map that came with that Cobble and Fog set helps all of those characters feel a little better, because that's what I've played them on most, and it's the best map, or at least equal best map with Hanging Gardens, in my opinion. So maybe Dracula is being helped there. I'm going to be mean. I'll move it back down. I'll move it to mid-tier, because it's probably only that part where you're sort of trying to suck the blood to regen health and stuff that's cool. It needs maybe something else to get it to high tier. Invisible Man, I think, is incredible. I really love those fog tokens. The fact that you can slip in and out of them, it makes it feel like this character should. He's kind of invisible. You don't know quite where he is, where he's coming from. And any map that allows you to have sort of other movements, quick movements around the board on top of the fog as well. Wow, it's really hard to sort of track this guy down. He's super elusive, as the Invisible Man should be. Also, a very cool mini. I really enjoy playing him as Invisible Man. I'd say in that set he's probably my favourite. Next up we have Jekyll and Hyde. I'm going to rate this high tier. It's very similar, in my opinion. It feels similar to Alice in terms of how big and small, you get different stat boosts, and in Jekyll and Hyde you get like you can't move, you'll take damage if you do, and stuff like that. It feels similar to that, but I like the way the Jekyll and Hyde deck is split between the two of them. It just feels like, yes, the other one, it feels like it's all Alice, and it's supposed to, because it's all Alice, just big and small. This one really makes it feel like you've got sort of the two characters in there trying to take control of the body. That's a really, really neat one. So yeah, that's really fun to play as that. It's an interesting one. King Arthur. I think a lot of people would be expecting me to put this really low, because a lot of times people do. I'm going to put it mid-tier because of Merlin. There's a couple of cards in there. Alright, yeah, you get Excalibur, massive hit. You get the chance to get Excalibur back. But then some of the other characters have just multiple 6 hits in their deck, so that feels weak. But Merlin having the chance to actually move your opponent around, that's a neat little trick, and I've seen it against me to great effect to cut my face off. Yeah, it's fun. King Arthur's okay, it's not great. Next up we have Little Red and the Huntsman. I think it's low tier. I really like the mechanism, and I think a lot of people do enjoy it. It's hard, so hard to teach. It really sucked the enjoyment out of the character for me. Now I want to go and play it again, and it will probably rise up, because I started to realise what I was doing wrong with this character, in terms of you want to use cards to boost movement that you don't need, because that allows you to get the right symbol to the top of your discard pile that's then triggering other effects on your cards, because basically every card effect is this only triggers, or A, B or C triggers depending on what was the previous symboled card you discarded. I like the idea, the mechanism really cool, completely different. It's just, out of the rest, it's one of the ones that you really have to play your cards in the right order, and if you can't or you don't, it feels like she's quite underpowered. But I think now I've thought of the boosting logic of you can boost a card movement and not use it, but you've got the right symbol there, then maybe it's stronger. And I just hadn't thought of that in time. Next up, we have Medusa, who I'm going to put in middle tier. Range. Really love a ranged character, and those harpies that you can use to block and pen someone in. Make them waste valuable cards getting through those harpies to get to you. It's just a lot of characters do have different types of movements. Like maybe one card allows them to just slip off the board and back on somewhere else, like the Invisible Man with his fog, not card, sorry. Bigfoot, which allows him to, I think, effectively go off the board and come back on. And a few that allow you to move through opponents and stuff. It just starts to mean that all of a sudden trapping someone in those harpies isn't as easy or as successful. Anyway, that is Medusa. The Raptors, it's got to be high tier, because what's kind of cooler than Raptors coming at you, and the fact that they play in a pack, it's very different. Normally you have your main character and a sidekick. Now that sidekick is often, it can be good, can be semi-strong, but in this case you've effectively got 3 sidekicks instead of a main character, so it's a very different way of playing. To counter those Raptors, we have the InGen workers and Robert Muldoon. It's a fairly cool idea of dropping these traps all over the place, and actually there's not too many characters outside of the Jurassic Park set that put stuff onto the board, which is interesting. I just find that it's a relatively uninspiring character apart from those traps. I do like them. They sort of, you know, it does make your opponent stop and think, but that's kind of it. And there we have a subtle transition, so you didn't notice that I filmed this video in 2 parts. First of all, or not first of all, because this is a continuous video, Robin Hood. He's fun, I like the merry men, but it's not an overly inspiring character. I think it's a mid-tier. It's nothing special, but it's ranged. I love a bit of range on the characters because it allows you just to sort of run away. And having those outlaws to be able to, you know, get in people's way, they're pretty handy. They're pretty weak, but they're handy still. So mid-tier. Sherlock Holmes. I think this is straight into a high tier. I really like the fact that the more you play the game, the more chance you have of sort of guessing what cards might be in that opponent's deck, because one of the things of Sherlock is you have to like guess one of their cards. That's pretty nice feature. Also, Watson is really quite strong with his like ranged weapon. That's quite cool. I like the dynamic between the two. Watson certainly feels like one of the few sidekicks that is really useful. Like, often you charge your sidekick in, you don't care if they die. Watson, you kind of do, because his cards are quite good. So yeah. Sinbad the Porter. I'm gonna put it... I've only played Sinbad once or twice. I think it deserves a high tier. I think it does, because it feels quite similar to Bruce Lee in the fact that you're trying to chain things together, and you really can chain things together if you get your cards right, but there's ways to get around that, and yeah, it's a fun one because he feels quite strong. So I know I said I don't want to just put strongest people at the top, but he kind of feels fun because he can feel super strong. Achilles, I've grown to like him a little bit more. He's got an interesting twist of when his sidekick dies, he's better. That's a pretty neat one, because it's again, it comes down to that choice of, well, I kind of want my sidekick to be alive because it's going to allow me to get in different positions and, maybe block my main character taking damage because you've got to go through the sidekick first. But you kind of also want your sidekick to go down in this because then you're hitting for more. But then your opponent knows that, so maybe your opponent doesn't want to take your sidekick out, which in turn means your sidekick is then available to you for longer. It's a nice mental game, but I think it's almost as much on the opponent as you, because they're the ones making that decision whether to try and actually get rid of your sidekick or not. And I think that means it's not the fun for you, it's the extra fun and thought for them, your opponent, that makes Achilles good. So that's why he's mid-tier. Bloody Mary is going to go straight into high tier for me, and that is because of the risk-reward factor she has going. You need a really small hand size to be able to trigger that extra action every turn. 3 actions a turn makes Bloody Mary really good to play because it feels unique. It feels like you're cheating a little bit when you manage it, but you are really risking it, because with 3 cards, do you have enough defense to survive like an onslaught from your opponent? And also, it's easy to stumble out of that. Obviously, at the start of the game, you've got a lot more cards. You've got to whittle down to only 3 cards to get the bonus action, and then some of your cards are doing more damage if it's your 3rd action and stuff like that. It's triggering little extra effects. That's really cool. So it's driving you to play that risk. And there's lovely occasions where it's like, I have my set number of cards, I've got my 3 cards, I could defend against this damage that you're attacking me with, but I'm gonna risk not. And again, it's just that risk reward. I don't often like a bit of push your luck, but this character does seem to work. That's Bloody Mary for that. Bullseye, I think, if there was a thing between high tier and mid tier, I'd put it there. I'm going to put it in mid tier because I don't want to level it up. Bullseye is really cool because the ability of Bullseye is you're ranged, but you can also always hit 5 spaces away. I think it's 5, it might be 4. That breaks normal ranged rules. And it means if you're in the center of a map, you can pretty much hit almost everywhere. So it makes running away from Bullseye really hard. So playing as Bullseye, it feels like you're constantly able to do something. Now, his attacks aren't necessarily massive, but they are enough that you feel like at least you're doing something every turn. And not every character has that. Oh, I'm going to level him up for that, because I think that is something important. It feels like you can do something good every turn, whereas sometimes a lot of other characters, it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to just have to maneuver this turn. With Bullseye, you've always got that almost always got that option of an attack. Next up, we have Daredevil, which is another one of these risk-reward characters. I know, I even said it with Bloody Mary, I'm not a huge fan of Push Your Luck, but I like this one because, again, you can blind boost, which means you're going to draw the top card from your deck and then go, this is added to my defense. Really love it as a concept. It can screw you over, it can save you, and it's Daredevil. I mean, it's a cool character from the Marvel universe that's not super overpowered or anything. It just fits, and it feels like the sort of good level of character. And that blind boosting is a lot of fun, and trying to get that deck, sort of play that deck right, because it's not the biggest deck of cards. There's a nice balance you've got to play there, so I really do enjoy playing Daredevil. Next up is Elektra, I nearly said versus the Hand. I think it's like a mid-tier plus. It would be another one on this line here, I think, because she's fun in terms of her main ability. The rest of the time, she's just a character that's kind of cool. So let's put her mid-tier. I'm not going to upgrade her this time. The ability of you die and you come back stronger is really awesome. That is so unique. And it's fun because it's almost, you've got that, right, I don't care about taking too much damage early on because then I'll get to be stronger, quicker. But actually, if you can hold out a few extra rounds before you die, that's just putting your opponent further through their deck, maybe further through some of their better cards. And that's fun to sort of play that bit. But I just find, apart from that, not gimmick, because it's her main cool power, there's not much else to sort of write home about. But good, solid character, I would say mid-tier plus on that one. Ghost Rider, it's... look, it seems like a really boring character because you're effectively chip damage. You can, on your turn, spend some of your tokens to drive through them, do a little bit of damage, but stay far enough away that you're not going to take damage on your turn. Yeah, it feels like the whole game you're both trying to just drive through them and run away. And I'm sure that, yeah, maybe I need to play Ghost Rider more, but playing with him seems uninspiring, and playing against him can be very frustrating, especially against a low movement character. It really feels like, ugh, I've got to chase this guy down constantly, and he's just going to drive away again. So really kind of annoying to play against, which normally makes them a good character. It's just, it doesn't feel mightily exciting playing as him. Luke Cage, yeah, pretty solid ability. Like, if you're playing, a brand new player is playing, yeah, give him Luke Cage. He's going to sponge damage every attack. But, oh, that gets fun. Yay. He's basically a tank, right? It's Luke Cage, it makes sense. He's going to take a lot of damage to take on. But, yeah, it just means some of the other characters which I find fun playing, it's not as fun playing against him, like Bruce Lee or whatever. It's not going to be... He does lots of little damage. Well, that's useless against a Luke Cage, which is annoying. And playing against Luke Cage is easier, I think. So great for a newer person, because you've got that just tankiness. But then he doesn't... He does have some cool things, like he can end someone's turn partway through if he defends with the right card or something. And that's fun when they're ready to pull off a combo and you've managed to stop them and they're not running away, so you can just thwack them next turn. I like that. It's just, it's not overly inspiring. Unlike Moon Knight, which is a phenomenal character, really sort of vibes off the Moon Knight character from the MCU, where each turn you are a different type of the Moon Knight character. So you're Moon Knight, you're Mr. Knight, you're Khonshu. You flick between them and each one of them does something different. So one has that extra movement, one has the extra attack, one has the extra defense, and you're constantly rotating between those three. There's no cards that affect that, like Alice or Jekyll and Hyde. It's just at the end of your turn you flick over to the next one, which means you can time it really nicely, because you're like, you know what, I can run up to you and next turn I'm going to be doing more damage. And then you do the more damage and you're like, right, next time I'm going to be I've got more defense, which means it doesn't need to matter as much about me still being next to you. And yeah, I mean, this came out at the perfect time for me, because I really enjoyed the Moon Knight series on Disney Plus. And then actually being able to play that character at the same time, it's just cemented it as so much fun. And playing that character brings all like the cool scenes from that series again to life in that board game setting. So it, you know, top tier for me. Maybe not everyone, but for me. Sun Wukong the Monkey King is one of my favourite characters. just because of those clones, right? It's a bit like Monkey King from Dota 2, an online MOBA game that I play on PC a lot. But it's a fun character, even forgetting that part, just because of like the levels of mischief, where he has a attack card that is 0, but if you defend against it, he's attacking again, and like just little things like that that really make you question, am I going to defend? Then he's whacking you with a big massive damage card instead, and you're like, why did I not defend that? Just absolutely brilliant trickery. And it doesn't hurt that it comes with one of the best maps, which is the Hanging Garden map, where you've got sort of high ground that deals more damage down to the low ground. Yes, full Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi. But putting that map aside, it's a super fun character. And out of the characters from that set that have 2 attacks on a turn, it's like on a single action, like you play 1 card and it's got 2 attacks. This is the one that does it the best, in my opinion, because of that trickery. Yennenga, we'll go mid-tier. Again, it's like a mid-tier, almost plus. Because range, really love a range, but the thing here is the archers. You can kind of splash damage off you onto your archers, which gives you some great choice of like, I don't want to be taking this damage, I'll just put a little bit on that archer because he's in the same zone as me, which is really helpful. There's also the choice there because then you've got to have the archer in the same zone as you. Normally you want to spread out a little bit if you're all ranged, and then it's like, well, because they've got like 2 health, the archers, it's like, if I give that one 2 damage, it's out. So maybe I'll take 1 damage and give it 1 damage, so it's still in, and allows me to sponge another one later on, but it can still fight and attack. So yeah, it's an interesting one to play as. One that it's just not, it's not massively inspiring, but I'd put it in mid-tier, not quite mid-tier plus. Dr. Sattler and Dr. Sattler, sorry. It's a bit of a boring gameplay. Now, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't help, sorry. In fact, it hurts this character that it was against the T-Rex. Because the entire time you're playing as this duo, you are just running away, effectively. You're running around the map as much as possible to drop all these tokens, because when you've dropped those tokens, you can use the full amount of them. There's no point often playing some of their cards when you've only got 1 or 2 tokens down. Like, you need the full like 6 or 5 or 6 tokens down on the game board, and it just feels like, again, a bit like with Ghost Rider, I find you're constantly running until you've, in this case, maybe a little bit better than Ghost Rider, you're constantly running to do something, and it's like you're taking a couple of turns to like power up and then you're doing something. I just think some of the other characters sort of do that a little bit better, where it doesn't take you that many turns. Like Beowulf, for instance, yes, that does, you take the rage damage from a previous turn to like build that rage up and then spend it, but it feels like that's a good chunk of Beowulf, whereas it feels like that's all this duo is. So that's why Dr. Sattler and Dr. Malcolm are there. And the T-Rex, yeah, I'm going to put in mid-tier. Mid-tier plus. Mid-tier plus. And the reason for that, I would say, is the movement is really quite weak on the T-Rex, and it does feel against some really sort of maneuverable characters that you're at a disadvantage, but it is incredibly fun to play as this absolute beast of a character. I do kind of wish that it was like a boss monster that you could co-op against, but it's the only big mini we have, a big character we have, which means it can't move through the secret passageways, it can't do certain things. I really am looking forward to there being a couple of, or at least one other large character, big character, whatever they're referred to as, to be able to put the two of them up against each other. because I feel like it never feels like a fair fight for whatever reason against another normal sized character. Even if you lose, it feels like the odds were stacked against them. So it does mean it feels fun and strong to play as the T-Rex. It can be frustrating though. Yeah, so mid-tier plus, so maybe, we'll slide that in there. And I realise I've not put anything in the bottom tier. So, maybe we could maybe move some of these down to here. Then we could move some of these ones down. Let's say Dracula can come down. King Arthur can probably come down, as can Robin Hood, and let's leave it there. So I've moved a few down there because then we've got that mid-tier plus option, which is now just mid-tier. And I think that's fairly strong there. I think that's pretty accurate. Let me know how wrong I am on this though. Where am I going massively wrong? And again, this isn't on the strength of them, because otherwise Deadpool would not be in top tier, because he dies all the time. But it's for fun of playing these characters that I've sort of ranked them on. But let me know which one I'm massively wrong on. And yeah, Tier Maker seems pretty fun to play around with this sort of thing. So maybe when there's a few more characters, I'll do this again. But until next time, have a good Unmatched day.